Welcome, this is a new video and the focus here is going to be on assessment for Edexcel A-Level Economics. And today we're going to look at paper 1, which is the micro paper that assesses theme 1 and theme 3. So theme 1 being lower 6 micro, supply and demand analysis, market failure, and then theme 3, which is the theory of the firm plus labour markets. So let's have a look at this paper in a bit of depth. First thing to clock is the time. It's quite a long paper. All the papers are 2 hours long, half an hour longer than AS level. There are 100 marks available. So I think the idea is that you're supposed to spend 20 minutes reading, and then from then on it's a mark a minute essentially. So timing is pretty important. There are 3 sections. Section A is multiple choice, a few short answer questions, and then quite a few questions that are about maths. So this first question is all about production possibility frontier analysis. The question asks you to study the graph and just use the numbers and do a few easy calculations, no problem. The second question again is about production possibility frontiers. It's multiple choice. C is also about PPF. Question 2 here is maths, really, applying a small calculation and a multiplication. The next question is about cross price elasticity of demand. Students that are going to mess this up will mess it up for 2 reasons. The first reason is that they don't know the formula because they've not revised it, and then the second reason is they just can't do a percentage. Third question is about public goods again. So this is all theme 1. So this is an exam that you're taking after 2 years, and some of this material here you covered very, very early on in the course. So the ability to retain knowledge over a long period of time is incredibly important in this exam. Question 3 is not really economics in my view. It's just applying a percentage for 2 marks, no problem. You should be able to do that in less than 2 minutes, surely. Again, you could argue that this question is also really about maths, calculating a ratio. The economics comes in there in part C, where you have to come up with a reason for the difference. So again, this looks all theme 3 for me. So that's the end of kind of like the theme 1 stuff. You've got a question here that is theme 3. Theory of the firm. So you're asked to interpret a diagram. Fair enough, good question. Multiple choice on the same theme. Question 5 we're moving on to, still within section A. Some maths, easy. Theme 1, so some basic micro. Again, but back to theme 3. I think one thing to realise here as well is that in the answer booklet they'll often give you more space than you need, so don't feel as if you've got to fill up the whole answer booklet. There's only 2 marks for this question. So that's section A dealt with, so that's 25 minutes. I would say that you shouldn't really, they say spend no more than half an hour on this. I would say try and spend no more than 25 minutes on it. So we now move into section B. So for me this is the hardest bit of the paper because there's a load of numerical and qualitative data to wade through. The extracts can be very, very long. They're packed full of material that they expect you to assimilate and use, and you've got to do all of this at the speed of light. So they say that you're advised to spend an hour on this section. I think in reality you're probably going to end up spending a bit more on this section, and the way to do that and not run out of time is to try to wade through section A as fast as possible. Like if you can do maths and you know your stuff, section A shouldn't really be too much of a problem. So in this case, we've got the UK market for electricity and gas, some data, an extract. They expect you to use information from that extract. Second extract, a third extract. You've got to read all of this stuff, and then come the questions. 6A, the first part of section A and B, section B will always carry 5 marks. So let's look at the mark scheme and we can see how those 5 marks will be achieved. Here we go. So in this case there's 1 mark for knowledge, 1 mark for application and 3 for analysis. So that adds up to 5. Other 5 mark explain questions, I actually have seen a slightly different distribution of marks where 2 marks have been for application and 2 for knowledge, but only 1 for analysis. So they can vary that slightly from year to year, which is kind of annoying and frustrating for students. Okay, so the next question is discuss, which counts for 12 marks. That's something that will be there every single year. Discuss implies that you need a mixture of KAA, knowledge, application and analysis, 8 marks worth of that, combined with 4 marks of evaluation. Now, this type of question is not marked according to a points makes prizes approach. There's no separate marks awarded for knowledge, application, analysis. They're not marked separately. What happens is that the examiners are expecting you to write a really, really good answer, and it's skills based. It's a levels of response mark scheme. So, for example, if you just wrote out this the points here that they're putting up for the examiners to look at, if you just wrote these points out without really explaining them, then you would find yourself in level 1. Level 1 says displays isolated or imprecise knowledge and understanding of terms, concepts, theories and models. So what that basically means is that's the sort of student that well, 2 types of student really, like the really dim ones who never really understood it, or the students that I interact with. It's more likely to be the student that sat in the class, they understood it perfectly, they could answer the questions at the time, but they never really looked back and consolidated their work on a regular basis throughout term time. So as a consequence of that, they forgot it all. So when they came to revise, it wasn't revision, it was relearning, and maybe they left it all a bit late and their knowledge just isn't there. Now, that's a massive problem because you can make all sorts of points. You can make like tons and tons of points, but if it's all a bit imprecise and there's not much economics in there, you're going to be trapped in level 1. The next point in that mark band is use of generic or irrelevant information or examples. So what can happen here is that in my notes I might have taught you about I don't know, public goods in the context of flood defences, but this question is about TV licenses. But you don't care about that. You still give the example of flood defences that's completely irrelevant to the context. So if you just write generic, standard answers that aren't applied, you can end up trapped in level 1. It doesn't matter how many points you make, you will be in level 1. The final thing there is a descriptive approach, which has no chains of reasoning or links between causes and consequences. So again, if you just write out the mark scheme, you'll be in level 1 because you're not really explaining the points that you're making. You're in the business of constructing an answer that consists of no more than unsubstantiated assertions. You're just asserting stuff. There's no logic chains. So you don't want to be in level 1. And the way that you stop yourself from being in level 1 is by knowing your stuff and by being able to write. Level 2 displays elements of knowledge and understanding of economic principles, concepts and theories. So this student knows a little bit more economics than the student that's caught in level 1 because they have some knowledge, they have elements of knowledge. They can apply economic ideas and relate them to economic problems in context. What that means is that in the context of the case study, although it does not focus on the broad elements of the question. So there might be elements where that they have applied, but it's still not completely focused on the context. A narrow response. What that means is that maybe you've only developed one idea. For a question like this, for 8 marks of KAA, you're probably looking for 2 developed themes. If you only write one theme, you'll be trapped in level 2, so the most you can score is 5 out of 8. Chains of reasoning are developed, but the answer may lack balance. So what that basically means again is it's quite narrow. That's why there's the semicolon there. There could be other things that really should be in your answer that you've not included within it. So it's kind of narrow and unbalanced. So again, my feelings would be for this type of question, a 12-mark question, where there's 8 KAA, you want 2 KAA themes. Okay, level 3 is where you want to be. So that type of student really does know their stuff, and they can write well. So they've practiced really hard on their homework. They've developed their writing skills. They've done their homework somewhere quiet, and they've thought about what they've been writing. They've read their work before they've handed it in. They've really tried to hone their writing skills. They also know loads of economics. So this student demonstrates accurate knowledge and understanding of the concepts, principles and models. They've got an ability to link knowledge and understanding in context using relevant and focused examples which are fully integrated. So they've not only demonstrated excellent knowledge, they're also able to apply that knowledge in context, in the context of the extracts and the data. Economic ideas are carefully selected and applied appropriately to economic issues and problems. So there's good quality economics in there, but none of it is irrelevant. It's all directly targeted at answering the question in particular. And the answer demonstrates logical and coherent chains of reasoning. So there's no unsubstantiated assertions here. And for me, you would say that there's a link here between knowing your stuff and applying it and creating logic chains. It's got to be relevant logic chains that's based on established economic theory. Okay, so you've done your KAA. I would write my 2 KAA points, one after the other, and then I would go for 2 evaluation themes worth 2 marks each. So again, it's not marked on a points makes prizes basis. It's marked according to levels of response. So for level 1, identification of generic evaluative comments without supporting evidence, reference to context. So if you just say, it depends on the extent, or there could be a time lag, but you don't explain why there could be a time lag, and what you're saying doesn't really make too much sense in relation to the extracts, then it's generic and you'll be in level 1. Generic basically means it can apply in all situations. Another one might be you start writing about how the impacts of expansionary fiscal policy might be dependent on whether there's a negative output gap or not. And maybe it just doesn't fit because the extracts kind of indicate that there might not be a negative output gap to close. So it's avoid pre-learnt judgments that you can just grab out of the can and apply. What you need to do is think about the context and make judgments that fit that particular context. So, for example, if there was a question about the effective interest rates, and you wrote about how the UK government or the Bank of England has increased interest rates over the last 10 years, well, that's generic because the Bank of England hasn't done that. It has to be realistic. The best judgments are realistic and they match the context. Okay, so to get into level 2, I'll just go back there. To level 1, there's no evidence of a logical chain of reasoning. So you've just slammed down a few kind of off-the-peg judgments. You've not really explained it all. So if you do that, the most you can get is 2 out of 4. So again, this is the kind of points makes prizes approach to evaluation. Don't do it. Just don't do it. Level 2, evaluative comments supported by relevant reasoning and appropriate reference to context. So these judgments are relevant to the context. So they do match the extract. They do make sense. Evaluation recognizes different viewpoints and/or is critical of the evidence. So I think that stands for itself. So if you're kind of looking at an extract and say, well, the author of this extract thinks X, Y, Z. Well, a new classical economist might disagree with this because that's level 2. Okay, so let's move on to the next question. Question 6C is the command word is assess, and it's worth 10 marks. So again, with this question, it's marked according to a levels of response mark scheme. So again, if you just copied out, if you were a dodgy, lying student, and you were set a question and you could Google the mark scheme, then basically you're going to have a bit of a problem because you're going to get really frustrated. You'll think, well, I copied out the mark scheme, right? So why haven't I got full marks? Well, answer is it's not points makes prizes. It's marked according to a levels of response mark scheme. So again, it's very similar to the other one, similar words. So if you don't know much stuff and it's all a bit kind of vague and unapplied, you're in level 1. If it's a little bit better than that, you're in level 2. And a good student who knows their stuff, who understands the context, who's also got some background knowledge that allows them to apply their economics in a sensible way because they're aware of big issue, big trends. Those students will score level 3 marks. Also the students that can write well, that have learnt how to construct logic chains. Again, for a 6 mark, I'd probably aim for kind of 2 KIA themes. For evaluation, there's 4 marks, so the grid there is exactly the same as it was for the 8 mark question, where there were also 4 marks of evaluation. So again, the dodgy student just writes some, it depends on a time lag. It's completely generic. It's not applied at all. There's no logic chain. It's pretty rubbish. So they get level 1 marks. Absolutely right and proper that they get that. A good student can explain their ideas, they can explain their judgments make sense in relation to the context, and their answers show some genuine judgments. So next question is the 8-mark question, which is the command word of examine. So with this question, this one is not marked according to a levels of response mark scheme. This is like really massively important. For a question like this, there is absolutely no marks at all for providing a definition. What you must do instead is construct two KAA themes, and there'll be a mark within each of those themes for knowledge, 1 mark for application, 1 mark for analysis. 2 lots of 3 brings you up to 6, and then the final 2 marks are for evaluation. So I'll just show you that. Just gone a bit too far there. So you can see here there's no levels of response mark scheme. So with this type of question, if you were a cheater, the mark scheme would help you. Like, if you wrote down your knowledge point, you get a mark for that. Then you could write some analysis here. That would be enough probably to get the analysis mark. And then you picked out one of those applications that was relevant to the point that you made. You could get 3 for that KAA theme, and then you would just do the same again. You would come up with the second knowledge point, analyze it, apply it. That's your second lot of 3. And then the final 2 marks, as I say, are for evaluation. 2 brief evaluative comments will do, or you could write 1 evaluative theme that's a little bit longer, that's worth 2 marks. Again, if you were a cheat, you'd find the mark scheme useful to answer this type of question. If you did write out, assemble bits and pieces from this mark scheme, you could get 8 out of 8 quite easily on this question. Not that I'm suggesting that you should cheat. Far from it. But some of you are addicted to cheating. So we'll leave that one. With reference to extract C and your own knowledge, discuss policies businesses and government might implement to reduce labour inability to benefit the energy sector. So this is definitely a theme 3 topic. The command words discuss, it's marked out of 15. So we go back here to a levels of response mark scheme. So again, copying out the mark, what the examiners have written for other teachers, it's not going to work, because what they want is quality. They want you to demonstrate accurate knowledge of concepts, principles and models. They want you to show an ability to link knowledge and understanding in context using relevant and focused examples which are fully integrated. They expect logical and coherent chains of reasoning. If you're just writing out the mark scheme, you're not going to be showing those things. You're going to be in level 1 or maybe the lower reaches of level 2. And the other 6 marks are for evaluation. So this evaluation grid is a little bit longer. So level 1, identification of generic evaluative comments without supporting evidence, reference to the context, no evidence of a logical chain of reasoning. So you don't want to be there. Level 2, evidence of evaluation of alternative approaches, which is unbalanced. Evaluative comments with supporting evidence, reference to context, and a partially developed chain of reasoning. So what's the difference between level 1 and level 2 is you've tried to offer some justification for the judgments that you've made, but it's not particularly great, and your chain of reasoning is only partially developed. The best students will be in level 3 evaluation. So the descriptor there is evaluative comments supported by a relevant chain of reasoning and appropriate reference to context. So your judgments have to match the context. You can't just pick out something kind of theoretical that doesn't fit that particular situation. Again, you're allowed to use relevant examples that fit the context. So again, students who've got good background knowledge have a massive advantage over students that just do computer gaming or Facebook or whatever, your social media of choice. A recognition of different viewpoints and being able to recognize that an ability to think critically is important, that can help you to get into level 3 as well. Okay, so that is section B over and done with. That's a massive slog. As I say, they reckon it'll take you an hour to do that. I think maybe more. So the last section is section C. So let's go to this. Okay, so section C is an essay or an extended response. It's worth 25 marks, and you can pick one from two. So you're only supposed to do one of these questions. Look at the word there, either. Fortunately, I've not taught a student that's written an answer to both 7 and 8 so far. Hopefully that won't happen in the future. So you only need to answer one of these essays. They reckon 30 minutes. Yeah, it's extremely time pressured. So how is this type of question marked? Again, it's levels of response all the way. So let's have a look. Similar. So level 1, this is for KAA. There's 16 marks of KAA out of the 25 and 9 marks of evaluation. So level 1 KAA, if you're in this band, the most that you can get is 4 out of 16 marks for KAA. So again, if you just wrote out the mark scheme, you're probably in level 1 or level 2. So what does level 1 say? Displays isolated or imprecise knowledge and understanding of terms, concepts, theories and models. So again, if you don't know your stuff, it doesn't really matter how much you write, you're going to be in level 1. So the moral of the story is get some revision done, make sure you consolidate over the year, so on the day of the exam your knowledge is tip top. Use of generic or irrelevant information or examples. Yeah, we've already talked about that. Descriptive approach, which has no chains of reasoning or links between causes and consequences. So again, I think there's a link here with knowledge. The type of student that makes unsubstantiated assertions generally does so because they actually don't know the transmission mechanisms. That's why they're not explaining the logic chain. That's why they're not be able to explain the links between causes and consequences, because they just don't know the stuff. So they just assert it instead. And asserting things, it doesn't matter how many assertions you make, you will score level 1 marks. It's not the number of points you make, it's the quality of your arguments. Level 2 displays elements of knowledge and understanding of economic principles, concepts and theories. So you've got better knowledge, applies economic ideas and relates them to the economic problems in context, although does not focus on the broad elements of the question. So you know a little bit more. You've made an attempt to apply, but you're not fully there. A narrow response or superficial. So you've only mentioned kind of one theme here. So your answer's a bit narrow. Superficial in the sense that your logic chains aren't very long. So this is an important thing to say here. So how many KAA themes would you go for? for a 25 mark essay where there's 16 marks of KAA. I would go for no more than 3 that are well developed. If you try to go for more themes than that, you'll get trapped in lower levels, because if you're trying to spread your time over too many points, you won't really develop each kind of theme properly. So I would go for 3 KAA themes within an essay. Level 3 demonstrates accurate knowledge and understanding of the concepts, principles and models, ability to apply economic concepts and relate them directly to the broad elements of the question, with evidence integrated into the answer. So you know your stuff and you're applying it. Analysis is clear and coherent. So what that basically means is that you can write. You not only know your stuff, but you can also write well too. So it's clear what you're trying to argue. It might not be fully balanced, so there could be, it might be a bit narrow still. There might be some elephants in the room that you've kind of ignored. Chains of reasoning are developed, but maybe there are other important aspects that should be in your answer that you've kind of ignored. If the examiner thinks that, then they'll park you in level 3, so the most you can score is 12 out of 16. And then level 4 is where you want to be. Demonstrates precise knowledge and understanding of the concepts, principles and models. So you really need to know your stuff. Ability to link knowledge and understanding in context using appropriate examples. So it's applied. Analysis is relevant and focused, with evidence fully and reliably integrated into your answer. Economic ideas are carefully selected and applied, so you're not just taking random stuff and wasting your time writing things that might be factually correct but aren't relevant to this particular question. So your ideas are carefully selected and applied appropriately to economic issues and problems. The issues and problems outlined in the question, essentially. The answer demonstrates logical and coherent chains of reasoning. So you've got logic chains there. Again, you can't learn how to write well. This is where it's so important that you spend good quality time on your homework. Okay, so then we go into the evaluation. So how do you evaluate? Well, I think a good thing to do might be, after each KAA theme, you might then want to write your evaluation of that theme. So you make your first KAA theme, you then evaluate it. You then make your second KAA theme, then you evaluate it. You make your third KAA theme, then you evaluate it. You might then want to come to some sort of final judgment. So that would be a final paragraph, and then you answer the question. So how can you score evaluation? The most obvious way is just to explain why something might work, or what might not work rather, or counter arguments, or what might happen if ceteris paribus broke down, or other factors that it might depend on. So let's look at this then. Level 1, identification of generic evaluative comments without supporting evidence, reference to context, no evidence of a logical chain of reasoning. So this would be the student that go, well, it all depends, there could be a time lag, or it depends on the magnitude of the interest rate change, or something lame like that. There's no logic chain there, and it's generic. So you're not going to do that unless you're absolutely desperate and you can't think of anything. Level 2, evidence of evaluation of alternative approaches. Yeah, so the other side of the argument, essentially, which is unbalanced, leading to unsubstantiated judgments. So you haven't kind of fully explored this other side of the argument. Evaluative comments with supporting evidence, reference to context, and a partially developed chain of reasoning. So when you make your counter arguments, you have to explain, analyze your judgments. You have to analyze your evaluation. And then level 3, where you want to be, evaluative comments supported by relevant reasoning and appropriate reference to context. Evaluation recognises different viewpoints and is critical of the evidence provided and all the assumptions underlying the analysis, enabling informed judgments to be made. So here what we're saying is that towards the end of the answer, you really need to come down on one side of the argument or not to make a final informed judgment. That's really, really important. If you don't make that final informed judgment, you can't get into level 3. So one more time, for the essay, what I would suggest is you don't get bogged down with like loads and loads of definitions at the start. You just get straight into your answer. Make a KAA theme, counterpoint it with some evaluation, leave a line, go into your second KAA theme, finish it, maybe leave a line again, counterpoint it with some evaluation of your second KAA theme, and then do the same for your third theme. Write it, explore the KAA, leave a line, then evaluate it, criticize it, say why it might not work, say what it might depend on. And then finally, your last paragraph is summative. It's just making some final judgments, pulling things together. That's what evaluation is, judgment. Okay, I hope you found this useful. It's gone on a little bit longer than I thought, but hey ho.